Good morning. It's Friday, May 20th. The guy next to me doesn't have a beard because Paul's in Minneapolis at VeeCon and Brian Kramer was in a driverless car.
Everywhere I go, the people really want to know who I is and who I be. They stop and stare when they see me. If it's little once, no need to repeat.
Good morning. Brian Kramer is joining us. He's got his pushback shirt on if you can't see it. He's ready to go. He's basically ripping through it because it's a medium and he's got arms the size of Gigantor. So we're good to go on that.
I told Paul that I needed a bigger shirt, but at least it's like a fat guy in a little coat.
It's perfect. It's perfect. All right, we got a lot to talk about today. We're going to dig in. If you haven't seen Brian Kramer's video in a driverless car, which obviously driverless car technology isn't any, absolutely brand new thing, but, just learning about it, thinking about it, getting that firsthand experience, and then where we're going to go. We're going to talk that. We're going to talk Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, has a new podcast, and then a little bit of stock exchanges. But first, before we do that, Paul is out at VeeCon, Gary V's conference that is access only by having an NFT. And if you don't understand it, you can check back on yesterday's email that we had on asodu.com and learn a little bit more there. But we have a video from him on location this morning. So we're going to watch that first before we get going into the show.
Here we are in front of US Bank Stadium, day one of VeeCon. Last night was the welcome reception, and just look what the cat dragged in this morning.
Hey. Great to see everyone.
We had a great dinner last night. This is Claude and Jen. You know them already. Maybe not Jen as much. Jen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, I'm Jen Ruza, and I'm the EVP on the People and Experience team at VaynerX. So excited to be here.
And I hear that Jen is actually the one that does most of the work.
Jen's the SHIT.
Yes.
She gets it all done. I work for her. 1,000%.
If some of our audience might not know, this is Claude Silver, Chief Heart Officer of VaynerX. So how many people do you make sure are tucked in and happy and healthy and well?
About 1,500 to 1,600, depends on what Jen tells me every single day.
Just a couple.
A lot.
That number probably changes quite a bit.
On the daily.
I mean, basically, we would take care of every single person here if Gary said to, which basically
well,
we will anyway.
Well, you have 10,000 to take care of today, I think.
I think we can pull it off.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Small fry.
We're going to check in with you throughout the next few days. Just wanted to tell you about the energy. Just thousands of people lined up here in downtown Minneapolis. My Uber driver was telling me how great it was to have people and energy in and around the city again. One of the reasons Gary put on the event here, he just wanted to, contribute some life. He's already doing that. My Uber driver actually thanked me for the business.
That's amazing. They've been great.
I love that. Yeah, we've had repeat Uber drivers too.
That's always good when you have a repeat one.
I know. We're happy. Yeah. We can't wait to get inside.
We are. Just wanted to check in with you this morning. We'll come to you with a lot more stuff, but I'm glad I ran into you too this morning. I'll probably see you 20 other times, like at the grocery store, where you see the same person.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Later.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Here we are in front of US Bank.
All right. So if you don't know, VaynerX is Gary V's media company, and they span a lot of different kind of things that they do. They support a lot of the big brands across the country and across the world. So Paul has a little bit of familiarity with that crew just because of his early Vayner Mentors kind of inclusion, and then has been a part of that crowd. He was out to dinner with James Orsini and with the Sasha Group and that whole crew. So we'll check in with him, obviously. And if you follow him around social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, you probably see more of that as we go. But with that,
one of the best podcasts I've heard is with Gary V and Mark Zuckerberg, when they're talking about the metaverse. If you want to hear the best breakdown, NFTs, how it all goes together, look that up. That's the best breakdown I've heard.
Yeah, actually, I think someone was saying that there's just this the energy around what Gary V is doing with Web3 technology, how he is implementing, NFTs and really seeing them as projects and not as just individual items where they have kind of a web out to other access and engagement with communities. He's got this whole Discord channel that's extremely active. So it's much past, like, a lot of people are like, well, why would I want to buy this little, a little like goofy looking hand-drawn thing. And I think that he's really done a great job at building community and building access around Web3 technology, metaverse technology, NFTs and things like that. So maybe we'll find that podcast and link it up in the show notes or share it out there for everyone if Brian can grab that. So, Brian, I want to ask you about, you were in a driverless car, I guess, earlier this week. The technology is by a company called Qubis. Did I say that right?
So that's what I thought it was. It's called Qubis.
Qubis, naturally, yes, because they're from Wales or something, right? they don't say the U.
Yes, I'll tell you what. Those are some of the Leonid, who's the founder of that company, has worked with that technology in other publicly traded companies, and he basically created it. When he came to the dealership to install that, I guess it wasn't. He thought it was a Prius Prime and it was a Prius gasoline. So he said it took him a little extra time. It would have taken me, I don't know, 30 days. It took him like about an hour to reroute the whatever it is that he did. But it was just basically about the size of an iPad, magnetic, almost like an antenna that goes on top of the rear passenger, the rear driver's side. But it was a black exterior, so you couldn't even see it. Now he's got a more sophisticated one that has cameras on the outside, like you'll see in San Francisco,
right?
On the highways and that sort of thing. But it requires drilling 2 holes, so we didn't do that on that demo just for in-city driving. But it's actually driven remote, like a drone.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. I was wondering if it was like embedded technology, understanding the road, or if it was remote driving. So essentially, like they were able to take a Prius that you had sitting on the lot or a demo or something like that, and just reroute a couple of things, put an antenna on it, and then be able to drive the car around remotely. Is that right?
Yes. So I've seen the device on the other side, which it was in Eastern Europe. So the person driving that car was in Eastern Europe, and Leonid was in the back seat, just talking to him. But the crazy thing is what the driver is doing. If you picture Guardians of the Galaxy 2, when they're all in those pods, I forget what they call it, from Xandar or whatever. And they're the Xandarians. It's similar to that, but it's a gaming console it actually has a 420-degree bird's eye view. So it can actually see more than we can. At one point we were driving and it stopped, and I looked over and I said, "Is there something wrong?" And all of a sudden the Sienna whipped by us because they didn't know that there was nobody in the driver's seat.
Right.
And Leonid said, he goes, "Yeah, they can see more than we can."
That's nuts. Okay, so here's my real question though, because we see the driverless technology and it's starting to get used for things like delivery. A lot of the like Uber and Lyft and things like that are utilizing it for food delivery and parcel delivery. But where do you see this, particularly for auto dealers? Because you had a couple of notes of like how you might actually implement this, especially in something where it's easy to install, right? And get in and install something quickly. Where do you see this in the next like 1 to 2 years from an auto dealer perspective, enhancing their ability to do business?
So I see different opportunities now that I'm tuning into this frequency. I'm seeing opportunities everywhere. For instance, this morning, my daughter, we just got her a car, right? So I drove her car home last night, but now my car was back at the dealership. So this morning, my wife had to give me a ride back to the dealership to pick up my car and then drive all the way back over here. Whereas I could have just had that thing pick me up and then driven it back and left it there. If you're flying into Fort Myers to Naples, I could, instead of having to take 2 cars, let's say I was going to drop a car off for you at the airport. Right. Instead of having 2 people go out there, I just have that car drive there, park in short-term parking. You get off the plane, you get into the vehicle, start it up, drive it around. You don't have to go back to the dealership, turn it in, fill out the forms and all that stuff. So if you picture Turo, and I'm sure a ton of people on this podcast are familiar with that. I rented one in Jackson Hole because there was no rental cars available.
Renting someone else.
I had to walk, 3 miles to somebody's apartment because I couldn't get any Ubers. So I go over there, he unlocks it, but that whole process it consumed a couple hours, which it's a nice place to go walking, but every place is. Yeah. But if I could have just had it pick me up and then not have to do all that, especially in urban areas where you've got like auxiliary lots, and you got people that have storage lots for offsite service, and some people have offsite body shops, or if you're taking a sublet car and you want to do you got a used car, it's under warranty, and you want to take it to the local Ford store, you typically have to have 2 lot porters that drive it over there. You get a chase car, then they both ride back in that car.
So time, expenses, like an extra car, miles, gas, all of that type of stuff ticks up instead of just like that car getting there, right?
And typically when you take a hot car, you get for those like Ben Stock or somebody, Brad Mugg in LA, people that have like, very limited space.
Yep.
They could have, the salesperson typically will jump on one of those cars, go to the other lot, find the car they're looking for, leave another desirable piece of inventory at the other lot. Now you can just summon it back. I mean, for parts deliveries, there's so many possibilities.
And so like I saw Ben Stock, he was like, but I still like driving cars. And I think like the first iteration of this is not that you go get in a car and do your morning commute every single day. Now there may be some people that are attached to that, but I think the first kind of layer and iteration is solving those friction points along, people resources and time resources, whether that be personal or business related. And that's going to be really the first place where we see this driverless technology, especially remote. I think especially remote driving, where there's like no one near the car, right? I think that's probably going to be the place where we see that first. So that's really interesting.
But he enjoys driving a Porsche, not, or whatever it is that he's driving, Targa. Yeah. But he doesn't, I promise you, enjoy driving. He's not getting into a car, giving somebody a ride across Queens to another one of his auxiliary lots in rush hour traffic. He definitely doesn't. So that's the kind of driving that we're trying to eliminate. Not exactly the joy of driving. Not the joy of driving.
Like keep the joy of driving, eliminate the hassle pieces. So I just have to know, how did it feel? Like, was there this anxiousness, this nervousness, this gut thing, or did it like immediately go, oh, I've been around this enough, right? And so now it just feels
that was the first time I was in it,
right?
So they had walked me through. They showed me videos about it, and Eric Davis, who used to be with Upstart, is the one that introduced us, and Zach Forrester is the other partner in it with Leonid. And they're just they're a tech startup basically,
right?
So you never know how it's going to go. And I know that with most autonomous driving cars, and you got Tesla and you got some other ones of similar tech, but you got to be sitting in the front seat. You can take your hands off the wheel, but you can't get out of the vehicle,
right?
And when I was in there with Leonid, he goes, "No, it just we just take your hands off the wheel." And I said, "Come on, you've got to be able to, you can't be. We need somebody not in the front seat." And you could tell he wasn't thrilled about it, but I've seen him. They did it with the Prime Minister of Lithuania over in Europe, and they do a lot of business. So it's not like it's some brand new thing. They're from San Francisco, where that's the epicenter of all of that, right? Florida just passed the legislation, but I mean, they've been doing this in Europe for some time now.
He's got a dog in the background. I absolutely love it. Yeah, no. So, I mean, obviously people have been doing this for quite some time, and a closed environment, being in that passenger seat, obviously there's a lot of nervousness around not being in the driver's seat, but I think it's a technology that's coming and something new. If you're watching the video, you can kind of see Brian sitting in the passenger seat, explaining what's going on. It looks like a ghost is in the driver's seat, but that ghost is obviously overseas. And just a really interesting environment. I think that there's going to be some use cases really soon. We've got the link to the full video in the show notes if you want to check it out.
The client at the end, as we pull around the corner, he was waiting to get picked up, and he's staring into the car. And I rolled down the window and I said, "What do you think?" And he said, "Who's driving that? The Invisible Man?"
Yeah. That's yeah. So
after we interviewed him, I said, "What do you think?" And he's like, I mean, you got to watch that video, but it's his reaction is priceless.
He's just like, "No, this is the weirdest thing," right? And I think maybe in California people are used to it, but like Naples, Florida, that's not your everyday
tech
yet
hub
at this point. So
some people call it heaven's waiting room.
Yes. Never heard it said that before, and I know exactly what you mean. My grandparents used to live in Naples, so I know exactly where you're headed there. Well, I've got a couple more things. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Jim Farley, the Ford CEO, and you're now a Lincoln dealer, so you are closer to the Ford environment, has started a podcast that is being completely paid for and supported by not just Spotify, but also Salesforce. He's interviewing guests like Tom Brady, Shepard, the Harley Davidson CEO, Jochen Zeitz, Emelia Hartford, the Duke of Richmond, and Patrice Banks, who a lot of us know through Women of Color Automotive Network. And she has the She-Canics that she just a really neat thing. So interesting to see another like that, watching Elon from a distance. I think another CEO of an OEM going, hey, gotta implement some personal branding and connect to all of these high level connections. And you kind of had a couple little quick takeaways before we got on, thinking about how CEOs might actually be engaging with some of these, not just technologies, but people and brand, right?
Well, it makes him seem a lot more real. You know, he used to be our district manager, regional manager when I was at Lexus back in the late 90s, calling on Germain Lexus up in Ohio. So his cousin's actually Chris Farley, who I was referencing at the beginning of the show. But he's got a lot of personality. Remember, he was the vice president of Scion when he launched that brand. He was disruptive, you know, with the way in which they launched that, and he's definitely the biggest disruptor in franchise automotive right now. I mean, he's
without a doubt.
Without a doubt. I mean, with what he's doing with the Lightning, with EVs, spinning all this stuff off, he hired, you know, I know that, you know, the first rule about Apple, you know, Titan Project is nobody talks about Apple Titan Project, but the guy that was running that is now, you know, in the C-suite at Ford. So I mean, he's bringing in, you know, you bring in that level of talent, things are going to be big. I mean, the meeting where I was at, he was talking about massive scale. He said, we need to quit looking at 20,000, 30,000 unit estimates, forecasts, because if you take a look at Tesla, they're talking 100,000, 200,000 per model. And they also simplify the build. And that's where he's going. I know that for a fact, is the simplification of where you can do over-the-air updates for whatever options you want. So it requires less chips. It's more robust, you know, like Tesla when they had that brake issue.
Well, and Paul and I have been talking about how it's, you know, software as an update, but also software as a service, right? And so they are leaning heavily that way. And you think about bringing someone from Apple into the C-suite, that is it. Like everyone thinks it's a phone, a hardware piece, but it's 100% software as a service, because you're recurring revenue. You're always getting the new phone, and you're always getting over the air updates, and you're paying for elements within an app store or within, you know, cloud-based technology. And so that level of thinking coming into an OEM is obviously happening. I really think that the really interesting thing here to me is that Ford isn't it's not brought to you by Ford. It's brought to you by Salesforce. So you've got to think that there's some level. I mean, Ford probably uses Salesforce as their CRM. Maybe Ford Direct does, but there's got to be some level of attention that Salesforce has on automotive, specifically retail automotive right now, that we might see coming in the near future, right?
Well, if you think about the amount of data that they have with their connected vehicles and how they communicate and how their consumers behave, and, you know, we only see the tip of the iceberg from all the data that they collect. I'm sure that they're looking at the efficiencies that they can do from a retargeting standpoint. A tier 2 and tier 3, I think, is really going to get disrupted in the next 5 years in terms of what that looks like and the OEM's involvement. And I'm preaching to the choir, but dealers are going to have to go more towards branding their experience, branding what they do. And the OEMs are going to be launching models like movie premieres, like Top Gun 2. And when a new model comes out, it's going to be surround sound, you know, like what you were talking about earlier, NFTs launching it and morphing into all these other. Well, I think that Top Gun 2, if you take a look at the marketing campaign for that, that's a great template for what it'll look like.
Yep, without a doubt. And I also think that the other piece of this with thinking about brand plus technology is, yes, dealers need to be thinking brand, thinking about experience, but I think they also have to be thinking about their data, understanding how their data is being leveraged by their OEM, and also how they can leverage their data, clean their data, and make it sufficient enough to prove to the OEMs that they can utilize that data in a good way. Because if Salesforce is trying to come into automotive more, it means they're trying to implement things like Salesforce Marketing Cloud and customer journeys. And so if the OEM is looking to do that, dealers should be looking to do that right now because they can pivot faster and move quicker with the data that they currently have. Well, that is all the time we have for today. We went through some stuff. Web3, talking driverless cars, and podcast by CEOs. Brian Kramer, thank you for joining us. Get out there and serve someone today and do it.